everyone, my name is Anubhav Singh and I'm a first year student at BSMU और हम जा रहे हैं अपने पहले एक्सकर्सिया के लिए।
फर्स्ट ईयर सेकंड सेमेस्टर स्टूडेंट
फर्स्ट ईयर सेकंड सेमेस्टर स्टूडेंट्स और हम जा रहे हैं पहली बार अपनी एक्सकर्सिया के लिए। एक्सकर्सिया मीन्स यहाँ पे स्मॉल ट्रिप होती है तो कॉलेज वाले लेके जाते हैं, ठीक है।
हमारे सर हमें लेके जा रहे हैं।
हाँ सर लेके जा रहे हैं
म्यूजियम,
ठीक है। तो चलते हैं
क्या होता है कैसे होता है।
हाँ रमेश भाई तो हीरो लग रहा है भाई आज।
हाँ भाई
साउथ फिल्म का
साउथ ठीक है। तो चलते हैं आज और देखते हैं कैसे जाता है आज पर। आपको भी लेके चलेंगे, दिखाते हैं जो हम देखने वाले। हमको पता तो है नहीं कुछ क्या देखने वाले हैं, बस जा रहे हैं, ठीक है। और फिलहाल तो कैब में भाई, ठीक है। आगे क्लिप्स आ जाएंगी, लाइक एंड सब्सक्राइब कर देना भाई। लोकेशन देखो, धूप निकली हुई है आज, फिर भी -26 है। धूप से फर्क ही नहीं है।
तुम कहाँ जा रहे हो? कहाँ हैं? हम यहाँ हैं, अभी यहाँ पे जा रहे हैं
भाई।
नहीं इतना घुमा के फिर क्यों लेके आए
हो गया है कांड, टाइम हो गया सर से मिलने का, लेकिन हम क्या कर रहे हैं, रास्ता खो गए। हमको जाना था उस साइड और हम जा रहे थे इस साइड। किसकी करामात थी ये?
म्यूजियम वो है ना, तो क्या नाम है, आर्ट गैलरी जो है वही है म्यूजियम हॉल में ख्याल से।
ये वाला?
हाँ
भाई जो भी है पहुंचा दो भाई।
ये आर्ट गैलरी नहीं है, ये बहुत दूर है।
धूप सही निकली आज, मज़ा आ रहा है धूप में। ठंड लग रही है अलग बात है भाई। क्या आपने हमको यहाँ ड्रॉप किया था और हम उस साइड चले गए थे और ये रहा हमारी ये। रास्ते से सर भाई हम पहुंच गए हैं और ठंड लग रही है भाई, ठंड लग रही है। हाँ अरे नहीं ठीक है, बॉडी अंदर से गर्म रखता है। ये किस चीज़ की आवाज़ है भाई? कूद रहे, चलते अच्छा भाई।
This is the mansion which was designed to be the Polar Explorers Museum. It has 3 major rooms. We'll look into each of them and I'll try to give you the brief summary of what you need to know from this specific location. And this, I believe, is the newest, or maybe the latest museum open in our city. That's it so far.
Okay, so this have 3 floors, this building?
2 floors.
2 floors, both are museums.
Well, it's like one museum. It's split into 2 floors, major ones. The first one is the introductory bit. What is the Arctic, how it was explored. The second one would be related either to the historical aspect to it, the one the person this museum is named after would be mostly discussed on the second floor. Same as the modern exploration of Russian Geographical Society, it's also on the second floor. So it's one complex.
Okay. भाई ये क्या डायनासोर है देख।
म्यूजियम से पुरानी वाली भाई है।
There is no point in recording because they don't have the context just yet.
No sir, like this is the whole context sir.
Once again, this specific museum is the latest one, despite it being called after one specific guy, being Valerian Antonov. It's actually generally a museum dedicated to polar explorers. Not only the Russian ones, but obviously the predominantly Russian scientific field of that would be discussed. However, this first room on the first floor is generally about what Arctic is and major contributors to this initial development. Mind you, here we'll be talking about the development which was happening before the First World War, which means the technical equipment was a lot to be desired, or left a lot to be desired. Usually we're talking about reinforced wood, and that's it. Which means that if you need to have your warm clothes, well, the amount of layers matters, the material does not, because it doesn't really have anything high-tech so far. All the boards here are interactive. Unfortunately, most of them are in Russian, so you might just enjoy pretty pictures. And probably, for the general understanding of things, you will need to have this wall in your mind and this one. Let's start with this one. So here you see 4 people, right? Are there any recognizable faces here? Well, you should know at least this guy, Fridtjof Nansen. Basically, whichever you think about oceanography and geography of the oceans and polar regions of the globe, this is the guy to go to. He was the Olympic champion in skiing, he was the Nobel Peace Prize winner, he was many things, including a polar exploration. So he was one of the first guys, he was Norwegian, and he actually made it so Norway became separate states. Before that it was a part of a major kingdom of Sweden, and he was the guy behind it being a separate country. But that's not the point here. The point here that if you wished to explore anything, let's say, at the Northern Pole or near the Northern Pole, because no one reached it just yet, it was physically impossible, most people died. Those who tried, those people died. You would need advice from this specific guy, because he was one of the first people who actually tried to discover what's modernly known as northern naval route, or northern sea route. So it's exactly going like this. So as you see, here is the map. It's skewed, let's say 90 degrees left, right? So this is the map of modern Russia, and this is the northern trade sea route. And obviously now we're having, let's say, advanced technology and, I don't know, nuclear icebreakers. It is manageable, and plus, let's say, the Earth seems to be heating up, so it actually gets more and more manageable every single year. At the time, you couldn't even guarantee that this land was real, or there was no separate islands there, because the mapping wasn't done, as it was quite severe, harsh conditions. Only some crazy Norwegians and Russians did that. And that's why the majority of people who would see in terms of their, let's say, their facial expression and their, let's say, origin, we're talking about Norwegians and Russians, and that's it. And by saying Russians, I mean Russian Empire stuff. Before the Soviet Union, like they would look like proper German person, but they would be, let's say, Russian citizenship or Russian Empire citizenship. Remember, Fridtjof Schmidt is so he started as a Russian Empire polar explorer. Later he became a Soviet explorer, and he was very famous for traveling specifically through the entirety of this thing on a slightly more reinforced ship. So he did manage to go all the way to, I believe, where is it? To another thing. So it's like this sort of travel. And he was the first guy to do it. And he was obviously, despite anything, he was the academic of the Russian, let's say, academy. So that was probably the highest honor he could have gotten. And he did it himself still. Obviously, he had a crew, but he did it himself. The other guys who we're having here, so, if we're talking about he is obviously, by looks of it, definitely a military guy.
Military general.
He is famous for creating the first floating exploration station. Not a ship per se, but exactly, it's like a safe place for those who are coming through, but it's no longer on ice, because that would be unstable and unreliable. It was exactly floating, and I believe it is still active. Obviously it has been renovated or decorated, but he was the guy who established that. And this is the guy who was technically the military commander of the entirety of these operations, because he was the head of the Baltic Fleet at the time. Unfortunately, his major contribution to the history, which you might later know, or you have already known, is he was the major general of the White movement, as in the ones who were fighting against Bolshevik and communism forces, and that cost him his life. Whichever models you have of the ships, these are exactly the ships which might have been used in real life trying to explore this region. They don't look exactly winter protected, and that is true, because there was nothing else to do at the time, technologically speaking. Whichever pieces of equipment or gear you see under the glass cases, they do come from a variety of expeditions, mind you, not from this one, because once again, it got lost, which means whichever they had, it was also lost with them. So these are exactly authentic, similar to the ones which might have been used in real life, however, not exactly from these expeditions. They were usually just bought from different antique houses and collected here, because once again, it's the recent museum, so they needed something to have authenticity, and that's what they did. What, did you find something medically related? No, just a smoking pipe.
Bullets. So is it a pipe?
It's exactly a smoking pipe. This is the small bag for the tobacco, Yeah, yeah, that's how you do it, absolutely, but you shouldn't. And these are specifically elements, let's say, these are like valves to control the cables. Mind you, you see the design is so you can use your mittens, otherwise you wouldn't be able to move it. Because if you take off your mittens in this specific region, well, congratulations, you probably like living without your hands.
So is it a horse like?
It's a horseshoe, yeah, exactly. Once again, if you would have taken horses or any other, well, deer might have worked, but in a very specific region, because that's the easiest way to move major transport. Or you use people, because people are the most resilient of the kind.
Oh,
Where's very fun?
Dedicated to Valerian Anubhav specifically. Once again, his profession was the navigator during this specific exploration tour, the Brusilov tour. It's called, well, it's named after Georgy Brusilov. He was the head of this specific expedition, obviously a military officer. Unfortunately, he did not survive this expedition specifically, only Albanov, and one of the seamen survived, one of the sailors. Yeah, so these are their photos. You might ask, why do we focus so much on Valerian Anubhav? By a very simple reason. He was born in Ufa. Actually, the place he was born, like the physical house, is still preserved. It's next to the main building of the Baskhir State University. The address would be Aksakov Street 6. So you might see it. You wouldn't enjoy it. It's just a little bit of a dilapidated house, but it is the house he was lived in. Later, as he was the son of a military officer, because it usually was a dynasty thing, they were traveling all over Russia. He got his education in St. Petersburg, as you would normally, if we're talking about naval exploration, but he spent most of his summers here, which means, technically speaking, he is exactly Ufa born and Ufa bred. And that is why it was easy to call this specific museum in his name. And generally speaking, the discussion about him, let's say, reinvigorated starting 2016 or 17, specifically because, once again, he was the prototype, one of the major Soviet adventure books about these captains who were exploring polar exploration. During the 90s, when everything Soviet was frowned upon or banned, his name was forgotten, and just recently it became relevant again, and once again this is why this museum was named after him. And he's a pretty cool guy generally, because he had major contributions, and once again, we never knew about, we could have never known about this specific exploration if not for his copy of the diary, which he managed to secure to the mainland. Steering wheel, I would argue, if you want to be unique, one person is steering, the other two are looking around. That might be funny.
जा भाई जा सुनील जा बड़ा तो जाता था
Yeah.
एक चढ़े ना
If you want to be semi-authentic, like one person stands here, the other person stands here, looking around means here might be the lens.
चलाओ रुपेश भाई
भाई बहुत ज्यादा देख लिया तुम लोग ने
सर क्या तुम्हें देख रहे सब
सर को पड़े तुम सब पढ़ोगे सर
फाइटिंग
फाइंड सर
ओए तुम इधर देखो हम लोग इधर देखेंगे
क्या ढूंढ रहे हो लड़की
ओके सर
You probably should do a switch properly.
चलिए हमें अपनी नाव मिल गई है
Yeah. So this is the commemorative plate, which was specifically, which was on the building of a church. As obviously, as soon as you have a major amount of, let's say, naval officers coming from a specific city, we're talking about a religious semi-feudal state, Russian Empire, which means there has to be a church specifically dedicated for naval officers. So this is the commemorative plaque from this specific church. Unfortunately, this is probably what people used at least for 150 years while they were exploring the northern regions of our planet. No matter whether we're talking about the North Pole or South Pole. But probably we're mostly talking about North Pole because it looked more visible and feasible to use it. South Pole required specific kind of ships which were developed 50 years after that. And if you wish to see a real ship, or at least a model of a ship which is currently used to keep, let's say, going through the southern naval route, here it is. It's exactly a nuclear icebreaker named after Albanov as well. So it's probably to scale. And I think I can find you several photos because, well, it's not that you can do a lot of fun, entertaining stuff while you are navigating through the northern seas. So people actually take lots of photos of them, especially if two ships are meeting. It looks very interesting and nice. But this is exactly how it looks like even in modern times. Just as well, the rest is rather not exactly relevant to you, it's just that this is a room dedicated to his specific life and expedition. Once again, he lived only for 37 years. Unfortunately, he died either during one of the bombing of the railroad tracks, because once again, this was the Civil War, and he was, well, it wasn't like attacked personally to him, but he unfortunately did manage to get into the crossfire. Or, if you might imagine, it's Civil War, which means famine and lots of diseases are spreading, and the medicine is scarce. He was the unlucky one who didn't get his medicine in time. Don't care. I don't care. Oh, I see. Okay, then we cannot pirate that easily. Can we? Oh, actually we can. Yay.
Really successful.
Yeah. So here, it's exactly the guy whose personal belongings you see here and all over the specific cases. He was a major officer, as you see. He managed to live from 1926 to 2004. He is the first-rank captain. He was the Great Patriotic War, let's say, fighter. And he was a major polar explorer. These are the authentic documents. As you see, they are written not even in Cyrillic, because he was that old. Yeah, he was born in the Ufa Canton, which is no longer a region even in the Soviet Union. And just some different personal photos. Some of them are restored, not in a great manner, but that's what you have. Yeah. Yeah, it's exactly, it is a pass, yeah. This one is... Oh, it's actually, it is, what is it like? It's a military pensioner certificate. It's a Russian Federation one. And this one is the previous one, the Soviet one. Sure. Yeah, just here we had the major contributions once again to the exploration. Mostly we're talking about making the Northern Sea route an actual route and not just a way people agreed to call it this way. One of the guys is still alive. Actually, if you follow, let's say, the lifelines of them, most of them are obviously Soviet Union officers, as you might expect. These are, let's say, real people's autographs, people who are probably currently there, specifically. And the good thing about this being a new museum and a polar exploration museum, which means every single year, when, let's say, a tour, 6-month tour or 3-month tour ends, people who are born in Ufa, they are coming back here and they bring some, let's say, gifts or donations for the museum of this guy. So the majority of authentic things you've seen, let's say, in the glass box on the first floor, second floor, they come from these sorts of expeditions. Unless these are models of ships, which are obviously not the ones. Yeah.
So these are bullets?
Yeah, these are bullets, yeah. These are bullets of one specific rifle, 1886, and they are found in 2010. Ice tends to preserve things. And this is exactly the model of one transport which can be used in these sorts of things. As you might suspect, Soviets were a little bit crazy, at least in terms of normally when you have these extreme temperatures, you assume people would just be working in shifts, as in coming and going, some temporary settlements. Not anymore, said the Soviets, and they established cities below, let's say, the northern, what is it like? Northern line, I think that's the way you should call it, which means there are actual major cities with at least 200 people living, for example, which have to get their supplies, well, via these sorts of transport. Because, yeah, the railroad is not exactly feasible with the land which is built there. It is possible, or maybe it will become possible, but not now. The air travel is obviously limited by the fog and other weather conditions, but these are actual cities where people live and work. If you're asking, is every single Russian that crazy? No, I'm not. I would like to live in this sort of city.
Yes.
Yeah.
Boise.
This is actually the head of our republic, the current head of our republic. And that is why, obviously, he needed to take a photo. He found the place to take a photo, as you did. Yeah.
Penguins.
Yeah. I believe it's believed to be the easiest job in the world, right? How was it? Penguin. What is it? It's not standard. Penguin keeper, I think, because there is a problem. Penguins aren't exactly used to flights of small aircraft, which means they just fall on their backs, so that some of them can just stand up on their own. There's a special guy dedicated for this specific job, to make penguins stand up. Otherwise, they would literally die sometimes. Because as you know...
Shakira.
Yeah. Because you feel warm.
ठंड मर जाता है
ले भाई तेरी वीडियो
Yeah. So basically that is it. Right? That's how it looks. That's what we have here.
अभी हो गया हमारा फोटोशूट म्यूजियम का, और अब निकल रहे हैं अब हमारी नेक्स्ट क्लास के लिए, जो कि है नर्सिंग की। हॉस्पिटल 8 जाना है हमें, और निकलते भाई। मज़ा आया भाई, लेकिन जान के यहाँ की हिस्ट्री के बारे में और जो हमने देखे चेहरे, मज़ा आया।
फोटो शूट करा ना म्यूजियम में, अलग बात है।
अब तो ठंड भी नहीं लग रही, अंदर गर्मी थी बहुत मस्त वाली।
बाकी सर के साथ इसलिए ज़्यादा मजा आया।
हाँ सर की इंग्लिश माँ कसम भाई
एक नंबर। सर ने सबको समझाया डिटेल में, वो भी
इतनी तो गाइड भी नहीं करता भाई जितनी सर ने कर दी भाई,
और क्या
कसम से
डिटेल में हर चीज। वो सर बहुत चिल पिला, आराम से फोटो खींचो। जब तक कोई भी चीज, जब तक कोई मना ना करे, जब तक कुछ भी करो, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है।
एक नंबर। चलिए अब मिलेंगे आपको अगले ब्लॉग में। इस ब्लॉग के लिए इतना ही, या फिर हो सकता है नर्सिंग वाला वीडियो आ जाए, ठीक है। अभी क्लास जा रहे, शायद से उधर कभी कुछ क्लिप डाल दूँ, तो लाइक एंड सब्सक्राइब कर देना और देखते रहना ब्लॉग्स। मिलते हैं अगले ब्लॉग में। पाका पाका।